Miss Joni Lamb? Well, she went to Miss Denise, and there was all kinds of things that she would share with her. She would share texts.
Daystar Television Network is under pressure that goes beyond individual disputes on social media. It has spread to halls of the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, where reporters covering the story were forcibly barred from the premises, boardrooms, employment files, and public YouTube videos created by senior staff. Every time Daystar's leaders take a public action meant to keep the dispute under control, the action itself becomes part of the problem. Furthermore, it is getting harder to ignore the question of who is truly in charge of Daystar and how, given the growing amount of documentation around the choices made by the network's leadership team. Arnold Torres, Steve Wilhite, Joshua Brown, and Rachel Lamb Brown are the names at the core of the current institutional picture. Each of them has a recorded role in the choices, public declarations, and institutional reactions that have shaped Daystar's stance throughout this dispute, not because detractors have put them on a list at random. Furthermore, the documented record in each instance presents a narrative that is more detailed and detrimental to institutional legitimacy than any online opinion could produce on its own. I have a minor favor to ask of you before we go. Become a channel subscriber. More than 99% of you watch the videos without signing up. Thank you so much. It didn't cost you anything. Let's return to the video now. Let's begin with what we already know. Daystar's Senior Vice President of Affiliate Relations is Steve Wilhite. Managing the network's connections with the cable and satellite companies that provide Daystar's signal to those 64 million American homes is part of his job description. That is an important institutional role. This indicates that Steve Wilhite is among those in charge of maintaining Daystar's infrastructure. He is not a supporting character. He is a member of the leadership group. Steve Wilhite took a decision that the historical record amply illustrates when the controversy surrounding Jonathan and Susie Lamb came to light. He produced and released a video titled "Daystar Executive Speaks Out Against Misinformation." In that video, Wilhite addressed what he described as inaccurate statements regarding Jonathan Lamb's performance and departure from Daystar, according to reviewer reports and descriptions confirmed by numerous secondary sources. He discussed Jonathan's behavior while working for the company. He called the coverage of the Daystar story by presenter Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson misinformation. He disagreed with Jonathan's performance in the ministry. The video was not overlooked. A formal answer was recorded by Jonathan Lamb himself. After Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson recorded a reaction, the commentary community as a whole saw something that is now one of the most often referenced examples of Daystar's response to criticism. Steve Wilhite had a positive opinion of Jonathan when he was friendly with Joni Lamb. The portrayal changed when Joni got angry with Jonathan. Suddenly, he was someone who had lengthy lunches, disregarded his performance improvement goal, and made time-related decisions that the organization's close observers quickly saw as a pattern of post hoc justification. The timeline of events made it extremely difficult to accept at face value the idea that a man who had worked in the ministry for more than 15 years and had been praised by the same organization that now described him as underperforming had suddenly revealed performance issues right at the moment he refused to sign an NDA. There is no room for conjecture regarding that timeline. It is recorded in the audio of the board meeting that the Roy Report examined. On November 16, 2023, Jonathan received his NDA ultimatum. His wife's pay was lowered to $1,000 per month, his in-laws were sacked, his income was halved, and his perks were eliminated. In November 2024, he was fired after being put on a performance improvement plan. The order in which those events transpired from the NDA refusal to the institutional retribution to the termination is recorded. That passage was not addressed in Steve Wilhite's video. It concentrated on the conclusion, the termination, and provided a justification for it that detractors could not reconcile with the chronology of earlier events. However, There were other institutional communications from Daystar's leadership that were more illuminating than Will Height's video. The recorded talks with CFO Arnold Torres are the source of that differentiation. Daystar's chief operational and finance officer is Arnold Torres. At the board meeting on November 16, 2023, he was elected to the Daystar board, and Jonathan was coerced into signing the NDA. It is not an accidental sequence. At the same meeting that the ultimatum was given, Torres was appointed to the board. Jonathan taped the audio of that board meeting, which the Roy's report then examined. It details the pressure put on Jonathan, the ministry's lawyers' threats, and the request for a 24-hour deadline on the NDA. Torres was there the entire time. As more audio was shared and examined, later recordings of Torres were made available to the public. Torres defended Daystar's approach of compelling insiders and key employees to sign non-disclosure agreements in one of the most important of those tapes. His audio-recorded argument of that policy was included in the documentation of Daystar's leadership's understanding and articulation of internal responsibility. In a tape, the organization that claims to be truthful and transparent to its millions of viewers claimed that its own CFO was intentionally creating a system of policies that would prevent important insiders from speaking out about what they knew. Because of this, the NDA demand made on Jonathan Lamb is much more than a one-time overreach. The CFO of the organization defended the institutional policy on audio, which applied to the individual with the most in-depth knowledge of the specific controversies that the institution had the strongest incentive to hide. Additionally, Daystar responded in a way that added another documented layer to the story when observers and detractors started commenting on those tapes. The National Religious Broadcasters Convention expelled podcasters who had been reporting on the Daystar controversy. Accounts of those deletions have linked Daystar's head of security, Shannon Kelly, to the NRB incident. Kelly is the same man who was seen on the network's security camera installing a GPS tracker in Jonathan's car. The removal of the broadcasters was due to their attendance at the convention, which gave them access to sources and context related to the topic they were covering. The decision to remove them had nothing to do with private security. The NRB's name was added to the expanding list of institutional settings where the Daystar dispute had produced documented repercussions, and it became a public event covered by Christian media outlets. Daystar and its followers have repeatedly responded to all of this with much the same rationale. Critics are creating a narrative that goes beyond what the evidence truly proves by collecting bits and pieces of facts and fusing them with presumptions. That is a valid caution that needs to be made very clear. Not all of the accusations made against each of the people involved in this topic are backed up by specific documentary proof that is directly related to their personal choices. It is truly the duty of critics to discern between what the institutional record demonstrates and what they are drawing from it. However, similar caution is as applicable in the opposite way. Critics do not see Daystar's own CFO's defense of NDAs for important insiders on a recorded audio clip as a fragment. The CFO is expressing himself in that way. Following the publication of a film by Steve Wilhite detailing a 15-year ministry employee's non-compliance with a performance plan, the same individual declined to sign a confidentiality agreement. A critic did not create the timeline. The sequence is recorded. That is not conjecture when the tape from the board meeting is available, has been examined by qualified journalists, and contains the NDA ultimatum. There is no inference made by a commentator when Shannon Kelly's expense reports indicate tracker purchases in October 2023, and Daystar's subsequent explanation places those purchases 2 years earlier. The docs contain it. It is true that neither Rachel Lamb Brown nor Joshua Brown can be held directly accountable for every institutional choice made by Daystar just because of their familial ties or public prominence. There is a difference, and it is important. However, Since Rachel Lamb Brown is now one of the key public representatives of the organization those decisions describe, it is getting harder to keep things tidy. When the Daystar subsidiary WPXS gave her family $550,000 in loans and Rebecca's family $780,000 in loans from an organization whose governing documents listed dead board members as active officers, she and her sister Rebecca wrote a note to Daystar's newsletter readership in July 2026, identifying themselves as members of the network's leadership team. And when she was featured in a widely shared picture alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who was the network's international representative. Being in a position of public leadership does not come without responsibility. Without acknowledging the criticism, you cannot claim the platform. Critics did not create the idea. Every time it characterizes Christian leadership as a calling that necessitates honesty, integrity, and service rather than self-defense, it teaches its audience the same lesson. Compared to Rachel, Josh Brown's circumstances are both simpler and more complex. Because the core question is binary and specific, his situation is easier. The decision that he was exonerated was either supported by the forensic evaluation that was carried out to assess his behavior, or it was not. In November 2023, Debbie Lienhard, the professional forensic counselor who carried out the examination, informed Jonathan Lamb that the procedure had not been finished in a way that would allow for a clear decision. She said that the part of the assessment where Josh would have responded to questions on his own without Rachel there had never happened. It's her account. The story of Josh Brown is not the same. In his taped police interview on March 14, 2025, he categorically denied any wrongdoing and blamed Jonathan's ambition and family politics for the entire affair. Both of those accounts can't be completely correct. They disagree on basic issues of what was looked at, what was found, and what the term cleared can actually imply in relation to an evaluation that the counselor claims was lacking. In May 2025, Colleyville police concluded the inquiry without filing any charges, stating that Baby Lamb had not filed an official complaint. They said that if she did, the case might be reopened. Every sincere examination of this issue should include the fact that no criminal charges were brought. However, it doesn't address the independent matter of what the internal forensic procedure found and whether the family was properly notified of its findings. This is where the frustration of the comments community makes the most sense. Critics want the controversy to go on, but it doesn't. It persists because there has never been a public discussion of the discrepancy between what Jonathan was informed and what the forensic counselor subsequently stated her approach could support, in a manner that the written record can confirm. When Daystar supporters claim that the issue is settled and the accusations are unfounded, those who closely monitor the evidence simply point to Debbie Lionheart's own stated account and ask, resolved by whom and on what basis? However, there is another aspect of the documented record that should be included in this discussion, but has gotten less attention than it merits. According to reports, Daystar staff members are unhappy with the current leadership structure that was put in place when Joni Lamb passed away. Commentators and independent publications have detailed internal conflict within the network under the present arrangement involving Rachel and the surviving executive team without naming specific staff. Accounts derived from what seem to be internal sources who are open to speaking with outside observers imply that the controversy is more than just criticism from the outside. The organization is experiencing internal pressure as a result. Under such combined pressure from both internal discontent and a documented outward accountability record, an organization must make an increasingly urgent decision. Legal demand letters, NDA regulations, journalists being barred from conferences, and public videos defending employee performance records are some of the ways it can keep handling the problem. It may also decide to choose a different route. Not because detractors have prevailed in a debate, but rather because any ministry's long-term viability depends on the confidence of its members as well as those who see it from the outside. Arnold Torres's argument of NDA requirements is an important institutional event because of this. A CFO is not upholding secrecy in theory when he publicly defends a policy that forbids important insiders from discussing their knowledge. He is defending a system that guarantees the organization maintains control over information that viewers and contributors may find relevant to their choice to keep funding it. Additionally, in a company that has corporate filings that list deceased board members as active officers of operational businesses, does not file a Form 9990, and does not publicly identify its current leadership structure following the passing of both of its founders, the information that those NDAs are intended to stifle is exactly the kind of information that must be publicly accessible for accountability. Although Joshua Brown and Rachel Lamb Brown are not the architects of every structural issue that has been documented, they are currently the most well-known individuals connected to an organization with numerous, well-documented, and unresolved structural issues. Rachel and Rebecca Publish outlined a leadership team that is going forward with faith and purpose in the July 2026 Daystar newsletter. The WPX's loans to their family were not mentioned. The dead board members on the business filings were not addressed. The incomplete forensic assessment was not addressed. It made no mention of Jonathan's future role in the ministry. What Joni allegedly said to Tom Calenderer 3 weeks prior to her passing was not addressed. The question of whether the NDA policy Arnold Torres advocated on audio is still in effect was not addressed. For his part, Jonathan Lamb has made it clear that he is prepared to work toward family reconciliation, forgiveness, and healing. He has expressed a want for sincere reconciliation. His sisters have not been attacked by him. He has penned memorials to his parents. He has stated that he is still praying for healing. After being sitting behind a camera at his mother's memorial and not being invited to her funeral, he posted that message on Instagram. One of the most stunning aspects of this entire affair is the difference between his public persona and the institutional posture of the organization that treated him as the documented evidence indicates. Because when you put the documented record together as a whole, rather than looking at each component separately, this is what it truly looks like. A man spent 15 years working in his family's ministry. He expressed worries about a forensic evaluation that was not comprehensive. The counselor who conducted the examination informed him that it had never been completed correctly. He was coerced into signing an NDA after requesting clarification. His pay was reduced when he refused. The position of his wife was deleted. His in-laws lost their jobs. His work vehicle was equipped with a GPS tracker. His family was tracked through the neighborhood by a private detective. On a Saturday, a man wearing a bulletproof vest showed up at his door carrying a notice of termination. The entire event began when the ministry's CFO went on audio to defend the NDA policy. In a public video, the senior vice president of the ministry blamed performance issues for the dismissal. The news source that had confirmed and published the recorded record received a legal demand letter from the ministry's attorney. The families of the two sisters who stayed with the church received loans totaling more than $1 million from the ministry's corporate subsidiary. The parents of the founders were identified as active board members in the ministry's corporate filings. Journalists were barred from a national broadcasting convention by the chief of security for the ministry. 8 advertising reels of a eulogy that framed accountability as being in contradiction to God were posted by the ministry. In the midst of all of this, supporters keep claiming that repetition is not proof and that critics have not presented enough evidence. Repetition is not proof, and they are correct. They are correct that accusations do not equate to convictions. They are correct that without concrete proof of her personal involvement, Rachel Lamb Brown cannot be held accountable for every choice made prior to her current public position. These are valid arguments that should be included in any sincere discussion of this dispute. However, there is no repeat in the documented record. It's not an accusation. There are audio recordings of board meetings, corporate documents, forensic counselor testimony, police interview transcripts, security camera footage, private investigator license plates, expense reports, and a termination letter delivered on a Saturday morning by a man wearing a bulletproof vest. That is what is now in the public domain. Furthermore, it is precise, confirmed, and uncontested. Whether or if Daystar's current representatives are prepared to deal honestly with that record could have a significant impact on the organization's future. Not with legal demand letters, not with NDA policies, not with performance videos about long lunches, but with integrity, documentation, and the same level of openness that every institution supported by donations owes to its funders and its trusted audience. The loudest voice will not settle the Daystar controversy. The greatest promotional reels won't address the problem, and neither will barring journalists from attending conferences or defending the systems put in place to prevent insiders from speaking. It will be settled, if it is settled at all, by the kind of institutional integrity that the recorded history demonstrates has continuously declined to offer. And until that happens, the questions that Arnold Torres's NDA policy was intended to stifle, that Steve Wilhite's video failed to address, and that the names of the dead board members on the WPXS file were never intended to be made public will remain unanswered, unrecorded, and unanswered.